This was clearly some ancient ruin of a vampire civilization. Perhaps here I would finally decipher the riddle of my destiny. Throughout these ruins, I found murals depicting the seminal events of vampire history. These scenes commemorated a great war between the ancient vampires and their rivals. In triumph, they banished their adversaries from the world and raised the pillars as the LoK that binds them. The image of the Reaver was inscribed throughout this place, always depicted with reverence. The vampire's holy weapon was destined to be borne by their prophesied hero, for whom it was forged. But if this was my destiny, why had the Reaver tried to consume me? This scene depicted the appointment of the original vampire guardians, each summoned to serve when the pillars were raised. Each guardian is aligned to the principle of the pillar he serves, and the balance guardian is the axis of them all. In their defeat, the vampire's enemy retaliated with a terrible curse, afflicting the vampires with a bloodthirst that turned their once noble race into ravenous predators. This curse plunged the vampires into despair and apparently drove many to madness and self-annihilation. What was it that so devastated them that they were driven to suicide?
No doubt was the evidence Mobius wished me to have. For the vampires had prophesied not one, but two champions. One destined to be Nosgoth's redeemer, the other its destroyer. The vampire's hero wielded the Reaver, forged for this very purpose. His opponent was clearly the champion of their adversaries, the Hilden, and brandished a flaming sword. The foretold outcome was unambiguous. The vampire hero would fall. This history, in part, I knew already. How, as the vampires began to die out, the pillars summoned human guardians to fulfill their roles. It seemed the ancient vampires had adopted, and when necessary, abducted the human guardians and made vampires of them when they came of age, until the humans rebelled against their masters. And here, I made a surprising discovery. It was Mobius, the time streamer, and Mortanius, guardian of death, who led the bloody revolt. Now, I understood why Mobius hated me so intensely. I was the first vampire guardian in all these centuries, and he knew what my coming signified. Or perhaps I reminded him of all he had forsaken. I was confronted again with depictions of the vampire's champion, the bearer of the Reaver blade. And here too was his Hilden adversary, with blazing eyes brandishing a flaming sword. Two heroes locked in combat which only one would survive. But which one? These murals prophesied two possible outcomes. I didn't know what Mobius was trying to concoct, but this all seemed too convenient. For my ancient ancestors, the dark gift was clearly a curse, damning them to a kind of spiritual purgatory.
I sought to unravel the mystery of my fate, and in this image lay my first clue. For this scene depicted the forging of the Reaver, the weapon destined to become my prison, and I recognized its maker. The years had changed him, but this was unmistakably the vampire Vorador, and in this era, he still lived. If I could reach him before Mobius's mob hunted him down, he would provide the answers I sought. These images chronicled Vorador's creation. As I already knew, he had not been born a vampire, but had been turned by the infamous Janos Audrin. But this mural suggested that Vorador's origins were even more significant. Apparently, he was the first human to whom the dark gift had been passed. This was the vampires' desperate bid to preserve their bloodline, for their enemies had cursed them not only with bloodthirst, but with sterility as well. The murals had suffered some damage. Once again I recognized the vampire's hero, but this scene revealed something new. For here they had also depicted his destined adversary, now partially obscured, who seemed to bear a flaming sword. This mural was similar to one I had seen before in the fountain room. These gargoyles were effigies of the vampire's enemies. In the corresponding murals, they were impaled by heroic vampire warriors. Perhaps this was a clue. These murals were attuned somehow to those in the fountain room, for this wall too had shattered. Here the images were unadulterated, and their meaning ominously clear. The vampire hero, the bearer of the Reaver Blade, was confronted by an adversary worthy of his powers. The enemy race, long banished, had a champion of their own, with flaming eyes and a fiery sword. The resemblance I bore to the adversary mocked all my hopes. Had Cain been the vampire hero of prophecy all along? Did he suspect what I was? For if I was this foretold adversary, then Mobius was right, and had always been right. I was destined to fight Cain and destroy him, or be destroyed. What part did free will play in any of it? I had seen this symbol throughout these ruins. I should have realized what it was they worshipped. Now there was no question, for this scene depicted the ancient vampires' torment and despair as their curse cast them from the wheel of fate. So this was the god whose abandonment had driven them to madness and suicide. Finally, I understood. It was not the bloodthirst, but their immortality that was the true nature of their enemy's curse. The wisest, strongest, most noble race, gulled by the voice of that old parasite. But I had seen him, and whatever he was no god. History is written by the victors. Beneath the vaults of Avernus, I discovered scenes that told a familiar story, but from a very different point of view. This was the work of the enemy race, and revealed what the vampire histories had conveniently omitted. How the noble vampires, god-ridden and righteous, had started the wars that would destroy both races, victor and vanquished alike. Their adversaries opposed the vampires' god, and refused to submit to the wheel of fate. For this, they were banished. I now understood the poetic irony of their curse, and my resemblance to the vampire's enemy no longer seemed so accidental. The banished race foretold a hero who would deliver them from their oppressors, and destroy the shackles of the vampire's tyrannous god, the same hero that bore the flaming sword. What game was this, where every player on the board claimed the same pawn?
So, Raziel, your true nature is finally revealed. You were never the vampire's savior. It is to the Hilden race you belong. And when Cain realizes this, what do you think he will do?
With newfound knowledge, and it burned within me.
Redeemer and Destroyer.
You must unite what has been set aside.
All the conflict and strife throughout history, all the fear and hatred, served but one purpose: to keep my master's wheel turning. All souls were prisoners, trapped in the pointless round of existence, leading distracted, blunted lives until death returned them, always in ignorance, to the wheel.
The coin is still turning.
But what hope had there been? One cannot fight the unseen.
Only then will the silent balance be armed for his true endeavor.
Despair, Raziel. There is no escape.
It was then I knew what I had to do. I alone could end this.